The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
Hare Krishna, everyone. You're listening to the Nam Ras Podcast, the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I'm so delighted to have Champakalata Sakhi Devi Dasi on with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Champaka is a author, a community developer, a teacher, and community developer at the Bhakti Center. And so we're so delighted to talk to you. For one reason, I'm delighted to talk to you also because not many Vaishnavis come on this podcast, believe it or not.
Because you're a misogynist? Because they're boycotting you?
The thing is that I have invited a bunch of Vaishnavis, but somehow it just never happened and some backed out because it's kind of like a big deal. It's like a little like intimidating in some ways. But I thank you for...
is still like a very male-dominated thing, I guess.
I guess so.
Is that true?
Maybe in the Hare Krishna world.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But anyways, really appreciate you taking the trip out and coming.
Thank you.
And we appreciate everything you bring to the table beyond just your gender, although your gender is a part of it. We're not just tokenizing you. We really want to talk to you.
The real reason why you had me on the show.
The real reason. Yeah. No, we're going to get into some good stuff. We're going to get into
So Champaka is an author, first of all. There's this book, I Chant Your Name, Poems for the Supreme Beloved. This book came out very recently, so it's hot off the press.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what this book is about.
Yeah. So actually, I actually didn't even plan to publish a book. This book just actually came about actually because of my husband.
Oh yeah, big shout out to Gopal Krishna Prabhu for also joining us. He's in the background here.
You can't see him, but he's hovering around.
He's here.
Yes. He's here. Yeah.
So if I look over there during the podcast, that's why I'm looking at him.
He's got cue cards. He's feeding her answers.
Yeah. But actually, I've always been a writer, and prayer is a really huge part of my spiritual life, and reading is a huge part of my spiritual life. Like I really love reading scripture, and not just reading scripture, but meditating on scripture and praying and really trying to internalize it, churn it, and make it real in my life. So writing poetry on scripture. So it's a book, and there's 70 poems, and each poem is based on a verse from our scriptures: Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Bhagavad Gita, and others. But those are like the main ones. And it was really, I never planned on publishing. It was just my own reflection on the verses that actually started. Rukmini Potter does 100-day projects.
Yes.
And I was inspired by her, but I talk about it in the introduction. I was actually really in the mood of, I'm just living at Bhakti Center. I'm in the Brahmacharini ashram. I'm just focused on my service. You know, I'm not going to take time to do like a 100-day project. That was just my mood because I was really absorbed in service and in an inspiring way. And it was, but I kept saying, oh, maybe I should do it, you know, do something creative. And when I kept saying, oh, maybe I'll do poetry. And one day Rukmini Potter was just like, just do it, just sit down. And so I chose to write every day a poem based on a verse. So for every single day, I was reading and just writing, and actually none of the poems are edited. They're all just what came from my heart. Mm-hmm. And
so you never took a second pass at any of the poems?
No,
I love that. Wow.
It's all just like completely stream of consciousness, basically.
Okay.
And then when I started sharing the poems with people, people would give the feedback that this is really inspiring for my spiritual life. And I feel inspired when I read it too. Like, oh, it also inspires me in my spiritual life. So when my husband read my poetry, he was like, you need to publish this. And at first I had, you know, the typical resistance. I don't want to publish a book, you know, I don't need to do that. But he really encouraged. So I said, okay, let me publish it as an offering to Guru, as an offering to Krishna with the prayer. I have two intentions for the book. One, the prayer that it inspires other people in their spiritual life when they read the poetry, and specifically inspires people as well to go deeper into prayer in their relationship with Krishna and deeper into scripture. And that also it inspires people to not just read, but to also process our Shastra and to also use their artistic, creative natures in Krishna's service. I'm also a dancer. I'm also was an actress. I also have a lot of different creative nature. And actually one time my spiritual master told me he wanted me to use my creative nature in Krishna's service in whatever way I was inspired. So I also really want to inspire other devotees to connect every aspect of their selves, every aspect of their consciousness, and become absorbed in Krishna consciousness, because we have to fully absorb our mind in Krishna consciousness, our heart in Krishna consciousness. We have to be passionate about Krishna consciousness. It shouldn't be robotic. It shouldn't be, okay, now I chant my japa, now I worship the deities, now I do this, now I do that. We have to find something where, you know, when I finished writing that, I literally was waking up thinking in poetry. I was waking up like composing poetry, thinking of Shastra, having dreams about that. And
kind of consumes you.
Yeah. And it should, like, the fire of devotional service should be like that, that we find a service or multiple services. Some people, they focus, okay, this is my service. I do book distribution, or I do this, or I do that. And others of us, like myself, I'm a very, like, I've done a lot of different things in Krishna consciousness, dressing the deities, or dancing, or preaching, teaching, cooking, or managing all the different things. But we have to find, where can I get to that place where I'm dreaming about service? I'm waking up in the morning excited to jump out of bed and excited to serve Krishna.
Wow.
And I found that this was just kind of like an outpouring of my heart that I wanted to just, in a detached way, like whether one person reads it or whether the whole world reads it, just offering it to my spiritual master was sufficient enough for me, that this is my offering to my spiritual master, this is my offering to Krishna. And even if one soul benefits from this book, it's the perfection of my life. So that's why I did it. And it was my husband who, he literally edited the whole thing, did the outlet, like the my friend Shaman Darshini did the artwork, and Gopal did all of the publishing, all of the editing. I just wrote it.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I want to come back to the statement you just made about like whether one person reads it or 10,000 people or whatever, you know, right? But before we get there, I'm just wondering, are there like poets, either devotional poets or poets from outside of our tradition, that particularly inspire you or serve as like models for you?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I never really studied any poetry. I've always written in my life, but I never, you know, some people, they're like, oh, I'm going to study this style and then I'm going to try to write in this style. I don't even know what my style is. I just did it. I didn't think about it. Nice. But the writers, the poets that do inspire me is Narottam Das Thakur. I'm just really, I guess if it's proper to say, in love with Narottam Das Thakur. There's that book about him, The Life and Glories of Narottam Das Thakur, and just his songs, his bhajans are so beautiful. And really all of the bhajans in our Songs of the Vaishnava Acharyas book, like I like actually a lot of times, I really love Satyananda Swami's The Living Name book and all of the exercises he has in that book for japa, because one of the, I would say the anchor in my Krishna consciousness is my japa. Even before coming to Krishna consciousness, I was a really big meditator. I was like really, really into meditating. And that was actually one of the big pulls to me, was japa. And I know it's funny because actually most devotees, they love kirtan. They're like, yeah, I love japa, but I love kirtan. And for me, it's like, yeah, I love kirtan, but I love japa. Like,
nice.
Like japa is like my everything. And
it's also so nice coming into it with an appreciation of it as meditation, as opposed to for so many of us, it's like you know, I'm not saying it's all negative, but it's like this thing that often doesn't feel like meditation. And then years later, you have to kind of rediscover it. And
Totally.
But to come in as a meditator and to say like, oh, this is a very powerful form of meditation.
Yeah.
I
was like on my driveway chanting, and my neighbor who knows about Krishna consciousness, he's like, oh, this is in the very beginning. Like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, I was meditating. And then he's like, oh, okay. And then I was thinking about it more, and I was like, I'm just like on the driveway walking back and forth. Like, am I really meditating?
Yeah.
Meditating, like in the real essence of what meditation is.
Like sometimes people ask you, they're like, oh, what's your meditation practice? And I'm like, oh, I do mantra meditation. Well, how much do you do? Like, you know, I aim to do, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're like, wow, 2 hours of meditation.
They think you're just sitting there.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, bro, don't worry about it. I'm like scrolling through my phone. I'm like scratching. Like, it's like, it's not exactly as you know, as you think it is. But
I have a funny story actually, because this is like a little embarrassing, but I was like a vegan yogi before I came to Krishna consciousness, and really like searching, really like a seeker. Like when I actually was reading The Journey Home by Radhanath Swami, that made me really like come to Krishna consciousness. And after reading that book, I planned a whole 17-month pilgrimage to India, and like left home and just, I went with like a school-sized backpack and a yoga mat. Like this was I didn't look in the mirror for a month. Like I was really inspired by that. But before coming to Krishna consciousness, I was yogi. Like I would sit on the roof with my hands like on my legs for, 2-3 hours and not move. And I would have, my friends would make fun of me because I would have suntan lines of fingers on my,
oh my God.
Yeah, because I wouldn't move. Because
that's hardcore.
To me, I was pretty hardcore. So
I'm sure that helps you in your japa now, right? It
really did, because when I that's why I'm sharing this, because I remember, that was my conception of meditation. Like you don't move, you don't drink water, you literally don't move. You're just completely absorbed. You bring the mind back. And I remember when I actually came to Vrindavan, that's actually when I really joined ISKCON, was in Vrindavan. And I remember actually being very bewildered when people were doing japa, like doing parikrama, walking around and like chatting with each other. And I mean, please forgive me if I made any offenses, but I was just very bewildered. Like, what? Like,
how does this meditation?
What are you doing?
This I was like, no, you sit down and you don't move until the conch shell blows for darshan, but I'm actually so grateful for that experience, because just like when I see my spiritual master Radhanath Swami chant japa, he's so focused, he doesn't move. And I really, to this day, I really try, as much as possible. My husband and I actually have a thing, unbroken japa. Like if one of us is chanting, we chant 16 rounds straight as much as possible.
Wow.
And we have a rule in our house, like if he's chanting or if I'm chanting or if we're chanting together, like we don't talk until we're done with our 16 rounds, because we really want to go deep in our 16 rounds. We really want to go deep in our japa. And I really have a very strong passion about japa and doing japa properly, and really praying to Krishna in our heart when we do japa, and crying out, and that, it's a very, very deep practice and a very, very serious practice. So that's why I'm so inspired by Satyananda Swami's Living Names and his exercises and prayers that he does, and his japa book. And also the reason why I even started talking about japa in the first place was that I'm not doing it right now, but I used to also like read some of the bhajans and the songs of the Vaishnava Acharya's book before sitting down to chant japa, because like getting into that mood before you start chanting japa, because I guess I feel a little passionate about this. Like I feel like maybe coming from that background, it helped me so much going into my japa deeply. And I feel like, I guess my prayer to devotees, anyone who's watching this, is to really go deep in your japa and treat it like meditation.
How has it affected your daily life, all the other aspects of your life when you have good japa? Because I've heard and I've experienced in some really small way that if you have good japa, like it trickles to all your other, what's going on in your life.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference. And I think I was actually just talking to my friend today who is now a mother, and she was actually expressing to her spiritual master about, struggling with feeling like her sadhana wasn't as deep as it was before. And he was really expressing to her that there's different phases of life. So I think that one of the things that I've always been open to is there's different phases of life. The reason why I'm answering like this is because when I lived in the DC temple, actually, I lived there for many years before coming to Bhakti Center. I had a very, very strict rule, no cell phone usage until after breakfast, like not even turning it on.
Wow.
And actually for a few years, I didn't use social media. I actually didn't even do text messaging or WhatsApp. Like if you needed me, you had to call me.
Nice.
And I went to the morning program every day from, 4:30 till 8:39. And when you just put your sadhana first, then actually I remember one time in Vrindavan, the DC temple president, it was like the end of the morning program. We were all basically like laughing in ecstasy. And my friend walked in and was like, what's going on? And she goes, we're just in ecstasy, it's the end of the morning program. And she told me that, that's a very serious job, managing that temple, being the temple president. And she said, if I have strong sadhana in the morning, then whatever else happens for the rest of the day, it's like it doesn't matter,
Wow.
But if I don't have strong sadhana, then little things affect me. And I use this example all the time, actually, when I teach classes. I one time had an experience where there was someone who was being like, not so nice to me, right? I think we've all had this experience at one point or other in our life. And I noticed that if I went really, really deep, not just attending the morning program on an external level, but internally being invested in the morning program, right? You understand the difference, like not just doing it robotically, but doing it like praying, because all of our acharyas say, like, when we get to the end of our japa, we should be crying, we should be having a change of heart, we should be
transformed
we
in some way.
Transformed in some way. We should feel Krishna's presence, and so I would notice that when I went deep in the morning program, if this person said something mean to me, it would be just like Rukmini Walker always uses the example of a lotus, right? The lotus, when it rains, the water doesn't go in the lotus, but it just rolls off the lotus flower, right? So it's like, oh, it doesn't even affect me. But if I don't have the strong sadhana, then someone says something not nice to me, it like really affects you. And now maybe I'm not attending the whole morning. I don't live in the temple anymore. I lived in the temple for 12 years. I just recently moved out, and my husband and I have a place together. But still, that same principle of sadhana first and really taking shelter, because if I don't take shelter, I'll get mental, I'll be slower at everything else. If I check my phone in the morning, I actually realize that I'm less productive, right?
Absolutely,
because I get disturbed, I get mental, but actually if I just know this is my schedule for the day and my sadhana comes first and I go really deep, then actually everything I do for the rest of the day will actually be a service, right? Because Radhanath Swami once told me that it's not the quantity of service that you do, but it's the quality. So, and he also told me, if you don't read the Bhagavad Gita, you can't give Bhagavad Gita class. So what I'm learning more and more, that if I'm going to be a teacher, if I want to share Krishna consciousness with others, I first have to be Krishna conscious myself. I first have to go deep myself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what do I have to give? I don't have anything to give.
Totally. Love it.
Yeah. I love that, like prioritizing and first things first. And where one of the places where you really come face to face with that is once you're a parent. So I know right now it's like we can't tell our daughter anything unless we're at least striving to set that example. So it's like, it's very easy for me to tell my daughter, my daughter is a teenager, like most teenagers, she's like glued to her phone, right? But how can I kind of help her to recognize that and change some of those patterns if I'm reaching for my phone first thing in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So even just on the basis, there's so much more to sadhana, but just even on the basis of like, no, I'm going to perform this austerity or have this self-discipline to really put Krishna and my time with Krishna first.
Yeah.
And I think there's a kind of a trust involved, right? Because it's like, I'm going to trust, like if I do that, Krishna's going to help me to make sure everything else happens.
Great point.
Yeah.
It is going to happen if I really believe he's got my back there.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like whether we think we're the doer, we think Krishna's the doer, right? Because like we understand that our sadhana pleases Krishna, and we understand that chanting his holy names pleases him, and that ultimately we don't do any of our services. We don't do anything. He does everything. He's just allowing us to do some little service for our own purification, our own benefit. But if we think, you know, and I'm preaching to myself right now, like if I think that, oh, I have so many things to get done, you know, I have to do all of these things, and I get so about that, and then I'm in the space of thinking I'm the doer, right? But if I think like, yeah, obviously I'm still going to act, I'm still going to do the things that I need to do, but let me first take shelter of Krishna, then actually I can start to have the experience of Krishna's the one doing.
Yeah.
You know, and then he, just like he says in the Bhagavad Gita, he preserves what I have and he carries what I lack. And he does that for all of us. And sometimes we think, oh, I have to be a pure devotee for him to do that. But no, it's for, you know, myself, a neophyte devotee. It's for all of us. If we're just trying, then Krishna reciprocates.
Yeah.
How has the experience been from, you said you lived in the temple for 12 years, but now like leaving the temple and living on your own, that's usually a time when people don't get more serious in Krishna consciousness, but they might like get lax. But in your case, it seems like you're just continuing like more like in a very enthusiastic way, which is very inspiring for me personally.
It's definitely a time of transition though.
Yeah.
It's definitely a time of transition, but I'm just so grateful to my Shiksha gurus and to my husband for the guidance. And I definitely, when you live in the temple for 12 years, and I think I was also very much like brahmacharini mindset, you know, like people would joke. I actually remember one time it was Jai Jagannath who said to me, he was like, yeah, you don't even really leave the temple much, do you? You know, like it would be like days and days. And people would be like, when was the last time you left the building? And I would be like, I actually don't know. I actually don't remember, because I would just be, and that sounds absurd.
No, but it sounds awesome. Because it's absorption.
It's absorption. Yeah. Because when you're just like my whole life, you know, 24 hours a day was, okay, I do my sadhana and then I do service. This is my life. This is my existence. And, you know, most people, that's not their path, right? But I had a calling even before I came to Krishna consciousness. I knew I wanted to live in an ashram. I was specifically looking for what is my path and where is a place I can live in an ashram, because I want to be absorbed. And you really get that living in the temple. You're just completely absorbed. But actually, I think I just trusted Krishna when we moved out of the ashram, and I trusted my husband also. And I feel so grateful because actually I feel since moving out of the ashram that my spiritual life is blossoming. I actually feel like I'm going deeper. I feel like I'm coming actually more into like my authentic self in Krishna consciousness, and more realizing actually like my calling for how I want to serve in this life. And it's interesting because actually just earlier today, I was listening to a little clip from Hari Vilas's podcast, and he was talking about how we kind of more realize our kind of karmic identity when we move out of the ashram. Because when we're in the ashram, we're just going with the flow, doing whatever we're told to do, basically, right? And there's a lot of surrender that's needed in that. And there's ecstasy in that. And there's joy in that, and doing the needful and being a family and just all putting your hands in. And at the same time, you know, like I was teaching yoga before I came to Krishna consciousness, and I have no regrets. I am so happy that I lived in the ashram. I'm so happy that I just literally dropped my entire material life and just completely absorbed myself in Krishna consciousness. But I do find now that I've moved out of the ashram, like so many people say to me all the time, like, wow, you're such a manager, you know, because I was a manager at Bhakti Center for many years, but it's actually completely not my nature. I would have never been a manager like in the material world. Like when I was growing up, I told my mom, I will never have a 9-to-5 job. I will never sit at a desk, and I will never use a computer, because I was a dancer and an actress and a writer and a creative and a teacher.
And Krishna's like, I'm going to make you do all those things
and
for the Bhakti Center.
And he made me do all of those things, all of the things. And I learned all of the things.
Yeah.
I did so many things. And yeah, I was like a hardcore manager there, you know. I was on the management team at Bhakti Center for 2 years.
Wow.
And actually, I think in my case, it had gotten to such a point of actually because I was doing this for my spiritual master, and I felt like this is how I could serve my spiritual master. So I was happy and I was grateful, but it was actually my husband and my Shiksha gurus who were like, Champak, you're doing this, but this is actually not who you are. Like, you're actually a teacher. You know, and I had been teaching at Bhakti Center, but it had always been kind of like, yeah, I'm a manager, and in my free time I teach, in my free time I cultivate. But now that I've moved out of the ashram, again, because of husband's mercy, like I'm actually just able to fully now focus on teaching, because that's actually my heart. My heart is going deep in my own Krishna consciousness and sharing Krishna consciousness with others. Not just like, it's beautiful. I'm not saying it's beautiful. Here's a book, take a book. But my heart specifically is actually taking someone's hand and holding their hand and becoming their friend. You know, to the depth of Krishna consciousness. Like, if they want until initiation, like, I want those long-term relationships where you're really caring for people on a long-term basis. And if I look at my career in Krishna consciousness, the things that have touched my heart the most deeply, of course, the moments dressing Radha Murlidhar and being on the altar as a pujari and serving spiritual master and all of those things. But I think the times where I've most deeply cried in joy has been when I've seen someone that I've brought to the temple for the first time, or, you know, introduced to Radhanath Swami for the first time or something like that, like take initiation, get married to a devotee. I have a friend who now just had a baby, and it just like seeing that is such a beautiful process. So that's where my heart is really at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I love about conversations like the one we're having, or like, you know, you're sharing, I really appreciate your honest sharing about sadhana, is that we're talking about sadhana in a very positive way. And one of the things I've noticed, and I don't know if it's just me or if you've picked up on this also, is I think we've sort of normalized this culture of like, whenever we talk about something like sadhana, particularly when it comes to practices like japa, it's almost like we have to talk about it in a negative way, especially when it's like our own, right? Like, it's almost like there's a social pressure to be like, my japa's terrible. My sadhana's like in the toilet. Like, you know, and whether it's out of like some sense of an expectation of like modesty, or whether it's guilt playing out in a way, or, but just to have conversations, like how often do you talk to someone? Maybe this happens more often to you than to me, but like, it's very rare for me to talk to someone and I'll be like, oh, like, how's it going? They're like, great. Like, I'm having this like amazing experience with japa right now. Like, can I just share like how much I loved, you know?
Yeah.
I'm so grateful you're bringing this up, Venkata. Thank you so much, Prabhu. It's funny because I literally on the way here was talking in the car with my husband, and I was talking about this exact thing, about how, you know, like a Vaishnava is supposed to be humble. And please don't say I'm saying like my japa is amazing or something like that. But I was saying to him, okay, we're not supposed to share our realizations in public, right? Because, you know, we've heard if you share your realizations, you lose the spiritual benefit of it, and it's not being humble and all of these things. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, okay, so I'm supposed to be humble, and I'm also supposed to, and I'm also like not like, I'm not supposed to, you know, share, oh, these are like my deepest realizations. But then I was telling him, but how is that kind of podcast going to help anyone? Like, isn't my duty when coming on this podcast to share my positive realizations? Because the whole purpose of this podcast is to have whoever's watching be inspired in their spiritual life. So I think that devotees can sometimes do a harm, you know, when they're just like negative, I'm struggling, it's hard like this. Because if you think about it, like if I went to a temple, right, and everybody was just talking about how they're struggling, like
it's not very attractive.
I wouldn't be like, I want to join this temple. I want to join this movement, you know? It's like, I joined this movement because I met people who were like, this is the real deal. You know, I mean, I was looking for a guru, and I was looking for someone that I could surrender to, that person, knowing this person is 100% enlightened. You know, and when I met Radhanath Swami, I knew that was the case. When I met devotees, I was like, these people are so inspiring. These people are so positive. I want to be like that.
Right.
And so I think it's also not in like a proud way, but in a positive way of good sadhana is possible. Good japa is possible.
Hopeful, right?
Yeah.
Hopeful. I mean, I hear you say that. I don't want to say push back, but I want to also say like
Say it.
You can push back.
You can
It's
push
allowed.
back. It's allowed.
No,
Yeah.
but the other side of that also is like, maybe I'm just cynical, but I'm also super suspect of going into spaces where everyone's like really shiny and happy like all the time, and they're like,
Right.
everything is great, just do this, and just
and they're like faking it.
and it's kind of So I mean, I guess where I kind of land on this is like, what's I think really compelling and attractive is when someone is like, this is real. There are like bad days, there are good days, there are ups, there are downs.
Yeah.
But in the end, there's something like ultimately hope giving about it, rather than like either artificially just like there are no problems, everything's perfect, sign on the dotted line, or like, everything's miserable all the time and we're just like, oh, woe is me. Right?
I just interviewed this devotee Gopal Prabhu yesterday from North Carolina. Something he said that really struck me is a Prabhupada quote where Prabhupada says, the first responsibility of a devotee is to be happy.
Yeah.
That's
He says that.
interesting,
He says that somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I was asking about similar questions like this. He's been devotee for 33 years, still really enthusiastic. I was like, "How do you do it, Prabhu?" And he quoted that, and that really struck me. First responsibility of a devotee is to be happy.
That famous like chant Hare Krishna and be
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also Kishore Gopal, actually, the kirtan singer who you also interviewed, he was telling me that every time he asks Radhanath Swami how he can serve him, Radhanath Swami says, just be happy. And he says this to so many disciples, because sometimes we get so mental. And I know also for me, I do this because I'm an Enneagram 2, for those of you who need the Enneagram. So there's like such like this mood of like, I sacrifice, myself for others,
need to be needed.
And I think that I was actually like quite healthy before I joined Krishna Consciousness. But then when I joined Krishna Consciousness, like all my Enneagram 2 tendencies came out, and there's such that, where was I going? There's such a tendency to be like, if I'm going to be like serious in spiritual life, I have to be like, sober or
like a martyr.
Yeah,
right?
like a martyr, the martyrdom. Exactly. Like I sacrifice myself for others, and I mean, we have in our scriptures Haridas Thakur, and we have, Vasudev Dutt, right, who prayed for all of the sins, and Bhakti Tirtha Swami. Actually, I remember when I read the Surrender book by Bhakti Tirtha Swami, where he's basically praying like that. I was so inspired. I went to my Shiksha Guru, like, I wanna pray like this, and I think that it's a deep topic because we do want to aspire for that level of selflessness, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the goal, to be so selfless that we're only thinking of others and we're only wanting to serve others and we're not thinking about ourselves at all. But the realization that I'm kind of recently having, and would love to hear your all thoughts, is that also, part of our service to others is making sure we're happy. So because who is it that said like a happy devotee is the best preaching? Because if we're in our attempt to sacrifice ourselves and serve others becoming miserable, then actually we're not going to serve anybody. But if we are actually taking steps in our life to be happy, then actually what will happen is that others are just attracted to that happiness because everybody wants happiness. And then they're going to ask us, what are you doing? And then we can preach to them,
right.
So, and the same with like, one time someone told me like they were in a marriage and they're like, I just have to sacrifice myself for this person, and this was not a Krishna conscious marriage. I know it's a very deep topic, all of that, won't get into that. But I was telling them, if this person is not receptive to your service and you're just trying to serve this one person and you're miserable and you're not able to serve anyone else, is that the best service that you can do? Or would it be better if you can situate yourself properly so that you can serve so many others? Yeah. So now I'm trying to actually see that, whatever I do to inspire myself is like, just like the football players, they put on that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It's like me chanting my japa is like putting on my spiritual armor, then so I can go out and fight, in
is that
New
what
York
football players
City.
are doing? I never knew.
I don't know if that's what they're doing, but I always saw it like
Om
that.
Krishna Namaha,
It's their tilaka.
Yeah.
It's for glare. I'm pretty sure it's
right?
for glare.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It has
I don't
purpose.
know. Okay, anyways.
But it's very like I'm going to get in the game.
Yeah,
it's
like,
yeah. That's as athletic as my like metaphors or
As you
analogies.
go.
That's as deep as I can go in this. I'm like, I know nothing else about this.
Well, but it's also like, I always think about, I was a ballet dancer before, and ballet dancers do serious tapasya.
Oh, yeah.
Like they do austerities. I was standing on wooden blocks, and your toes, they bleed. When you're a ballet dancer, like it is a normal thing to come home with bleeding. And I would dance for like 8 hours a day, right? It was like complete dedication, complete surrender. And I sometimes ask myself, like, but I was so inspired about the dancing, and I was so motivated, and I had such a goal, like I'm going to be in this company, that like the austerity was such a joy. And I always think about that when it comes to Krishna consciousness. We have the best goal, which is way better than being in the top dance company in New York City. We have the highest goal, pure love of God. So that we can do austerity to reach that goal.
Yeah. I did ballet for a day.
Are you serious?
It was a ballet dropout. I did a one ballet class one day, and I was like, this is like the hardest thing I've ever done.
When you were how old?
I was already, I was like, I was 17.
Oh, okay.
But I was a devotee who has since passed away, Lohitaksha Prabhu. He was my drama guru in the New York temple. He's one of the like old school legends, original Vaikunta player.
Yeah.
Disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he and his wife, his former wife, Rasigya, who also passed away, shortly thereafter. But they were both professional actors and ballet dancers. They were professional dancers when they joined.
Wow.
And they were part of this amazing troupe in 55th
cool.
Street. And anyway, I was doing a lot of dramas with him, and I had a sort of an interest towards in dance, like informally. And he was like, "Oh, you should like take a ballet class." So kind of more just to like sort of honor his recommendation, and I wanted to check it out, and I was like, this is
it's super hard,
not just physically, but it was mentally and emotionally. It was like I think discipline, there's few places I've seen discipline to that extent.
Actually, Yamuna Devi talked about that because she was a dancer, and it's in her book, her biography, that she said she was so grateful to her dance because it taught her discipline, which then helped her in Krishna consciousness, because dance is like super discipline.
We touched on marriage a little bit, but if you wanted to
I do want to go. I was so many great places to go. One thing before we get there though is I did hear you use the dreaded P word, preach. I don't know, you and I have some disagreements about that, but that's okay. But one thing I was reminded of.
How do you already have disagreements about?
Oh no, we go back.
Oh, okay.
What's her disagreement?
I'm not crazy about the word preach.
Yeah. I also like,
I'll tell you,
I do use the word, but at the same time, I also agree that word can be a bad word.
I'm not crazy about the word preach, but I'm even less crazy about devotees like euphemizing. Is that the term? But like,
what is euphemizing?
Where they would like they just switch out the word, but they keep the so it's
they keep the mentality.
Yeah, it's like, I'm gonna go preach to her. I'm gonna go outreach to her, and it's like it's the same thing, dude. Like, but I will say that in hearing what you were talking about in terms of this idea of like nothing inspires more. I'm paraphrasing, but nothing inspires others more than like a genuinely happy devotee.
Yeah.
It does remind me of like one of my favorite quotes, and I hope it's a true quote. It's been attributed to many people, but the person I've heard it attributed to the most is Saint Francis.
Yeah.
preach, 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 use words if you must.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that.
And so the idea of like actually our real preaching, whether you like that word or not, but we are a tradition that is outward facing. But I would contend, and I think I hear you agreeing with this, that beyond any words we can speak or any lines we can recite or whatever, it's really like how we're embodying and living. And a big part of that, I think, is being, right? Su sukham kartum avyayam, to be like, to actually joyfully perform Krishna consciousness. And you can't fake that, right? You have to, like, either you're genuinely inspired and uplifted and happy, or not. And that needs to be addressed.
But also, let me ask you a question. Like, what is it about that mentality that you don't like? Is it, because I also don't like the mentality where it's like, we're better than you.
Yes.
And I know the absolute truth and you don't. And I need to give it to you.
Yes.
Like, that's the mentality that I don't like. But when I say, I guess, sharing Krishna consciousness is I look at a person and I see that this person is so dear to Krishna, and whether they know Krishna in the name Krishna or the name Allah or Christ, right? Because we're a non-sectarian movement. Prabhupada said the name Allah is just as good as the name Krishna. But when I see a person and I see that they're so loved by Krishna, and I'm their servant, actually, and I'm not going to try to force someone or change someone, but I feel like I've been given the most incredible gift of Krishna consciousness, and it's transformed my life. I've gotten to know the beautiful blue boy who plays a flute, attracting all of our hearts, and receive the Maha Mantra and Guru's mercy. Like, if I have the opportunity to just share that with someone else, and then of course they have their own free will, whether or not they want to take it or not, but ultimately to just serve them in any way to come closer to God, whether their God is Krishna or their God is different God, but just to serve them to come closer to God, right, on their path, then that's service. And what's beautiful about it is when you see people change, when you see how their lives change, when you see how they begin to love Krishna and how happy they become, right? Because you're making them happy, you're serving them. It's not about you, it's about them, And Radhanath Swami, he actually, so many times this has happened where I've been standing next to a girl who's new, and so many times he'll say to me, you two should become best friends, or have you become friends, or are you taking care of her? So I see it as that. I see it as becoming someone's friend, but their actual friend, not their material friend wanting to get something from them, but their spiritual friend just wanting to serve them.
Well, that's, and I think, first of all, you said that beautifully. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm not trying to be like cheeky, but like, I really mean that. And also I think, like, just what you just said, right? Like, but their actual friend. And I think what a lot of us, or I'll speak for myself, I think a lot of times what I struggle with is seeing that sort of, that mentality that can be very sectarian, and that can be very sort of, have that kind of like superiority complex. But even subtly work its way into the like this is a friendship, but actually wink, wink, nod, nod. Really, it's me saving this person from, and I think what, and again, this gets into like a lot of subtleties, but I think one of the things that sort of rubs me the wrong way about it, or raises a red flag for me, is what I think you can start to lose a sense of respect for that person's autonomy as like an individual being, a part and parcel of Krishna, who has their own unique journey and their own unique relationship with Krishna, and suddenly they become like an object in my play. You see what I'm saying? Like, they become a side character in the great performance of Venkata, the preacher, and Krishna
you're
and Guru,
such
who
an
I'm trying to
amazing
impress.
Preacher,
and I made so and
you
so.
made
You know.
many devotees. Actually, Rukmini Walker says when she hears someone say that they made someone a devotee, she like wants to vomit because none of us make devotees.
I know.
Like everyone is a devotee already.
It's such a weird,
whether
like,
they know
right?
it or
It's
not.
like-
Yeah. Oh,
you imagine like
I made so many devotees. Like that's.
I always
just
imagine like someone like in like
so-
Santos like workshop, like whittling like these little like like
It's a
I made
historical.
devotees.
It's a historical thing from Prabhupada's time.
that
like
phrase,
Tamal
or-
Krishna Maharaj used to, like, when Prabhupada was away and then he used to come back, he used to have like a group of like shaved up bhaktas and
would-
present them to
and they would all give
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada a rose.
Not
or
that as a
something like
criticism. I'm just saying that's a
yeah.
historical thing. Making devotees and presenting those devotees to Srila Prabhupada.
Right. It's like, and then, I mean, with due respect to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who, from what I understand, also had his own sort of evolution, even in terms of how he would view things. And I wish he were still with us, but
Yeah.
I'd be so interested to hear how he's sort of shifted in his perspective. But again, with due respect, but there's something that can feel or can become if one doesn't have a certain kind of like purity of intention and purpose. There's something that can become very objectifying, right? Where it's like the other person now is my prop or my tool, my currency to get the affirmation or the validation from Krishna, but usually also Krishna in the form of Guru and other devotees and the society and position and all this stuff, right? And it can be a really insidious kind of trap, right? Because you don't even see it coming, and you're like, I am doing something, and you are. I mean, not you. I'm not, targeting this to you, but we all, right? We could have the best of intentions, and at the same time, that mentality creeps in, and suddenly it's, it's becoming that. And so for me, at least, I've kind of shifted. Or I've tried to shift in my approach and my way of thinking. And part of it also is just working with, as you do as well, working with young adults who are on such interesting, like life journeys that twist and turn and curve around bends. And it's been humbling just to recognize my own ego in all of that and my own attachment, where it can be like, oh, I have it figured out, like what this person's trajectory is. And it's like, again, that like doership coming in, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think I have it figured out, but maybe Krishna's got this whole other plan for them. And my role in it was like, I'm thinking it's this much, but it was really this much, right?
Yeah.
How would you say you keep a correct mentality?
I don't know if I do. I'm praying to. But I think 3 really important points, like from what Venkata Prabhu just said, is 1, this mentality of doership and wanting to get recognition from guru and devotees. It's not just in preaching, it can be in any service. It can be, here I am on the altar, doing such a beautiful dressing, and my validation as a devotee is guru and the devotees recognizing that. Whether it's gross, getting likes on Instagram, or subtle, in so many other ways. It can come any service we do, whether it, we could think I'm doing the most humble service, like, cleaning the bathroom. But if the ego is there, then it's still wanting recognition from that service. And I remember talking to my dear friend Shraddha Devi years ago about this, how I think sometimes it's like, okay, well, I have a false ego, so I shouldn't do that service. But actually, that false ego can stay there if we don't do the service. Like, we don't have pride because we do a service nicely. We have pride, and then the fact that we do a service nicely is our excuse to feel that pride.
Ooh, I love it. Can you repeat that again?
Repeat that, yeah.
Yeah, it's not my quote. I think it was Gauranga Prabhu or someone who said it, that we have pride. It's not because we do a service nicely that we have pride. But when we do a service nicely, we use it as an excuse to express that pride or feel that pride, right? Like,
And that's not good.
no, I'm saying that sometimes people think, oh, I shouldn't do this service because I have pride. I should just be a humble devotee in the background.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But we could be
But the problem is not the service that's being done nicely,
right? The problem is not
right?
the service. So you do the service, and the service purifies you, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm not qualified to do the service. I actually went to Radhanath Swami one time, and I said to him, because I also didn't make like a conscious decision that, oh, I want to like mentor anyone. I never made that conscious decision. I actually felt uncomfortable with that idea. If people would come to me, I'd be like, no, I'm a junior devotee. Like, let me introduce you to a senior devotee. But then I found that girls were starting to come to me when I, especially, actually even in DC, but when I lived at Bhakti Center, and they were specifically asking me, like, will you guide me in Krishna consciousness? And I told Radhanath Swami this in a darshan, and I said, I'm completely unqualified. What should I do? And he looked at me very seriously, and he said, the postal peon isn't qualified. The postal peon just delivers the message. You just deliver the message, and you should do the service. He specifically told me I should do that service. And he said, and then if something comes up that you don't know the answer to, don't pretend you're a senior devotee. Go to a senior devotee and ask them. So I always follow that rule. Like, I know I'm not qualified to do this service. Yes, I have pride. Yes, I have a false ego. I am not. I'm very, 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 very far away from being a pure devotee. But at the same time, even if I have the pride, even if I have the false ego, if I just keep praying for that pride to be purified, and I keep doing the service because I know that pleases Guru, whether it's this particular service or whether it's dressing the deities or any service, because false ego can always be there. Then by doing the service and by Guru's mercy, eventually the pride will be purified, because any way you serve Krishna, you become purified. So I think that's one important point. And then another important point is what you brought up, that sometimes when we're sharing Krishna consciousness with someone else, when we're mentoring them, we can get black and white about what we think they should be doing in their relationship with Krishna consciousness. And, devotees will be like, oh, they're chanting this many rounds, or, they're doing this or they're doing that. But like, we don't know their relationship with Krishna, and I am not Krishna. I do not know what's best for them. I can just try to serve them in such a way where they can figure that out, and they can go to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, right? Which I'm none of those things. They can go to Guru, they can go to Sadhu, and they can go to Shastra, and I can just help them in those principles if they're interested in that, right? If they're not interested, no problem. But if they want that, then I reciprocate. But I also think that when anyone takes shelter of Radhanath Swami, like when I took shelter, when anyone takes shelter, you ask him, can you be my spiritual master? And his response is always, I am happy to serve you in that way, if you want me to serve you, or in any way that you want.
Right, it's a
and
service.
so he's seeing, like, I actually had this experience last weekend. My husband and I, we led a retreat to Gita Nagari, and for the people in our community groups. And I taught a 2-hour like Krishna conscious dance workshop. And it's like a dance meditation, basically, to help people use movement and use their body to get from their head to their heart and to go deeper in their relationship with Krishna. And I had this really beautiful moment where they were all dancing with like their full heart, and like they were expressing their love. There was this one girl, Gazal, who's a beautiful soul, and she was just like dancing her heart out with so much joy. And I was looking at her, and I was looking at the other people in the room, and like I almost wanted to start crying. I was just like, every person in this room is my guru, and I can learn so much from them. And if I just have the opportunity to serve them in some small way, then that's the perfection of my life. And same thing, like one time my Shiksha Guru, one of my Shiksha Gurus, Giri Govardhan Prabhu, amazing devotee. I was thanking him basically like for giving me everything, because he literally gave me everything in my spiritual life, everything. He would talk to me for like hours every day. And I said, you've given me everything. What can I do to reciprocate? How can I serve you? And he said to me, and I'm only saying this because it's the principle, okay? He said, you might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Like if you go back to Godhead, or if you become a pure devotee, then you tell Krishna about me, when you get there. Like if you get there, then it gives me hope. And so I always remember that, like when I'm just sharing with others, like let them become a pure devotee, you know, not because of me, but because of them and Krishna. It has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But if they do that and they remember me, you know, then it's like, I actually wrote a poem about this in my book. It's called Airplane. And it's that, it's the verse.
I like that you have verses next to every poem. That's so cool.
I love
Yeah.
that. That's great.
Yeah, it's. I think it's actually the second poem or something in the book, and I can read it if you want. She's
Airplane 44.
Yeah, she's talking about how it's basically. You want me to read it? Okay, I'll read it.
I can read it.
I would like to read it.
Yeah, go
actually.
ahead.
Because then I can put the emotion into it.
Yeah, please.
It's inspired
Just see which
by
verse is-
Srimad Bhagavatam.
115. Oh, okay.
Yeah, 115:50. Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. So that's the verse, and then the poem is called Airplane. Airplane. Could it be me? Could it be coming to get me? I'm so undeserving, but the name on that plane is the same as mine. It is a swan carrier, chariot divine. One of a kind, me it has come to find. This moment, how did it come? The moments before my airplane had flown, all by my own. At the moment of death, no one can breathe my last breath or think my last thought, no matter what to me they taught. In that moment, help is gone. I'm by myself with God. The moments before, I was never alone. Help throughout my life, I was always shown. Devotees around me helped me to see how to love the Lord who has always loved me. By taking advantage of their example, I became trained. Devotional service to me they explained. By their love, everything I gained. My material bondage they unchained. This plane is going home. Goloka Vrindavan, to me it will show. Non-stop, straight shot. This is the destination I have always thought we will land. When our thoughts to Krishna we command. Where are my seniors, my loved ones and friends? Look up, my love, their chariot descends. Above my head to the spiritual world, where our eternal relationship will unfurl. Oh, my friends, remember this now. When your life force is still in check, your teachers allow you to board the flight deck.
Wow. Very nice.
So it's, like that, you know, when they're going, if they remember.
Yeah. It's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. We will get to marriage. But
We were going to start with that.
Start with that. And it's already been an hour.
Oh my gosh.
Really?
But since we're talking about the poems and since you shared a poem, I wanted to double back to something that you hinted at way back in the beginning, and that is this idea of whether one person reads it or 10,000. And particularly because the sort of the origins of the book are in 100-day project, right? And yeah, that's something that I think a lot of us, I mean, I can speak for myself, but you know, I think it's a kind of a shared experience where that's like the razor's edge of, you know, the world of social media and sharing in that world, right? Where it's like, you know, ideally it's an offering from the heart, of the heart to, as you said so beautifully, to Guru and Krishna. But you know, there's that there's that little number that's next to it telling you how many likes and how many views and how many followers and how many retweets and whatever the format is, right?
Yeah.
How do you navigate all of that?
Great
I
question.
don't know if I'm the best one to answer this question because there's so many devotees who have so much more experience on this than me. For so many years, I didn't even use social media at all.
For that reason, or was that one of the reasons?
I just wasn't interested. And before Krishna Consciousness, you know, I had like Facebook and so many friends. I was always very like social person. So I had all the friends and all the pictures, and I just didn't want to like waste time or identify with that. I didn't want false ego. I didn't want anyone looking at anything, you know, because they're like, especially before Krishna Consciousness, like that was definitely there. Like, who's seeing this picture? Am I living my best life in this picture? You know, like, what are they thinking?
Yeah, because
you know,
like, and I'm not to, you know, not to peg down your age. We're not going to ask you your age or anything,
it's fine.
but that you're a millennial, safe to say, or you're borderline.
I'm 35. So
what is that?
What
That's
is that?
millennial.
Is that a
I mean,
millennial?
when you grew up, let me put it this way: you grew up with Facebook, like when you were
I like joined Facebook in high school.
in high school,
Yeah.
and you were there for like the sort of transition to Instagram.
No, I was off social media before Instagram happened.
So Instagram happened when you were off social media.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm just trying to figure out, like, you kind of came of age at a time where Facebook was used for things like what?
Like messaging.
Like messaging.
But then also posting pictures of
Right.
you and your friends looking cute.
That's the kind of like proto Instagram, like living my best life, taking pictures of my meals. Or
That
my,
wasn't so much of a thing.
No, that wasn't a thing.
That wasn't a thing.
We're the same
wasn't
generation.
Yeah,
Okay.
that wasn't a thing. It was just, it first started with just like, you know, almost like text messaging, like
Yeah.
being able to like text people to hang out. But then it was like, you know, how many cute pictures do I have with my friends so I look popular?
Right.
You know?
So how do you navigate that now? That
Yeah. So I was off of it for a lot of years. Like when I moved into Bhakti Center, actually it was a little bit of a cultural shock for me, like coming from the DC temple to then, you know, all the girls in the ashram had Instagram and I just was clueless. Like I knew nothing, you know? And I just wasn't interested at all. I was just like, yeah, I don't need that to do my service. But then I actually started my Instagram when I did this 100-day project. And I specifically started it only for the purpose of posting my poems. And I had a very strict rule that I also didn't do scrolling. I didn't like check how many likes. I didn't.
You didn't. You made that a rule for yourself.
I made that a rule for
good.
myself. I need to get back to that rule. I'm definitely not following that rule right now. I am kind of interested.
Well, also your
but-
Instagram is it called a handle? I don't even. Is that the right term? But
profile name.
your
or
profile name, whatever. But even your name is really interesting, right?
Well,
Because
actually, for you, these words, because I
Yeah.
started it to post poems and the poems were for Krishna.
Right, so the you is Krishna.
Yeah. So the words are for Krishna. So, and I specifically made it for the purpose, because at that time I was managing the reception desk at Bhakti Center. And honestly, most of the conversations were like, hi, how are you? You know, and I actually wanted to have deeper conversations with people. So I thought maybe if I share on Instagram this poetry, my conversations will deepen. So I used that as a tool. And then I also got these really cool Bhagavad Gita cards by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu that have like the quotes.
Yeah.
And I put those at the reception desk, and my reception experience completely transformed. It was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Because basically what started happening was two things. When someone would come to check in, I would be like, do you want an inspiring quote for the day? And I would like hand them a card.
So you'd actually give them a card.
They would actually pick. It was like spiritual tarot cards.
Yeah.
You know, it was, so they would do like spiritual tarot cards, and then we would have a really cool conversation. And then also the people who would see my poetry would be like, instead of hi, how are you? It would be like, I read this poem and like, let's talk about it. It was really inspiring. So I found that my conversations actually went a lot deeper, which was really beautiful. And I just tried to detach myself from like the results of caring how many people followed my account. you know? And then actually, again, I was never really consistent with Instagram. Like I basically only used it to post if I was teaching a class or something like
You're
that.
talking about after the 100 days, right?
After the 100 days, I basically stopped using it. And
But you
then
did it. You did the 100 days.
I actually, after 50 days, a senior devotee told me stop and like focus on your service at Bhakti Center. So I felt like, okay, complete. That has
so
70.
That's so interesting. And I'm so glad you're sharing this piece of it too, because I think a part of the, and this is not me bashing 100 Day. I have like a lot of admiration, respect for a lot of, friends who I know, and even not friends, but just people I've never met, but who I've seen their 100 Day projects and I've been inspired. So this is not me shitting on 100 Day projects. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
But I think there is undeniably this sort of shadow side where it's a lot of pressure.
Pressure to finish.
It's pressure to finish.
Yeah.
It's notions of success and failure. In other words, if I don't do this,
you fail.
I've now publicly failed.
Yeah.
And again, we talk about Enneagram, right? So depending on your Enneagram type, like I'm a 3 with the 4 wing.
Oh yeah.
So like
so that would be a lot
terrifying.
For you. That would be a lot for you.
That is like the definition of terror for me, right?
Yeah, because it's the need to succeed.
Yeah. And then coupled with the 4 wing, by the way, is like a little bit of that creative, artistic, like, performing how sort of
need to be special
and different I am. And if I do that publicly and I don't make it, I mean, this is one of the reasons why, full confession, why I'm actually technically on Instagram, but I'm never on Instagram because to me, there's so much anxiety that's connected to it through things like 100 Day projects.
It's interesting because can I share one thing? Because on this topic, I'm having some really recent realizations on this very topic because after the 100 Day, and I didn't feel that at all. Like I was like, okay, senior devotee told me to stop. It's true. It's taking a lot of my time. Let me just focus again on Bhakti Center. Grateful I did it, but time to move on, but then like just write when I can, but then I just only use Instagram, like if I was posting a course or something like that. But actually recently, now that I'm really focusing on like teaching wisdom courses at Bhakti Center, I started teaching yoga at Bhakti Center, and I'm just really focusing on like teaching. And I'm seeing there's a need for me to use Instagram. And I told my husband this the other day, actually, and I actually talked with Vasudev about it, our head pujari, because he doesn't have an Instagram, like, of course, knowing Vasudev. And I was telling him, like I'm starting to post on Instagram and I'm just having these doubts, like, what is my goal? Is my goal to get followers? Is my goal to be like
great question.
Influential? I was like, that's not my goal. Like, I don't want that. But then also at the same time, I'm actually starting to feel super inspired. Like it's an inspired feeling. It's not like a anxiety feeling. It's like I actually told my husband, and I was laughing because I thought this was so weird. I was like, all of a sudden, Gopal, I am feeling this very strong desire to get a lot of followers. And I was telling him that the reason why I want this is because I want to bring more people to Bhakti Center. I want people to sign up for our wisdom courses. I want people to not to sign up to my wisdom courses. I want people to learn about Krishna, So if Instagram like is a way to do that, then I actually feel like inspired. And I used to see it as this like thing I was averse to, but they say that attachment and aversion is like two sides of the same coin, right? And our whole philosophy is we're not supposed to be attached or averse. We're supposed to serve Krishna. So it's like this thing now I'm seeing like, oh wow, I'm actually like getting excited about posting on Instagram and making reels, and I actually like want more followers, not because I want more followers, but because I want people to love Krishna. And I actually talked to Vasudev about that because Vasudev's like my best friend. He's like my brother. And I just respect him so much. I just literally like pay millions of obeisances at his lotus feet. And so I was asking him, like, should I do this? And he was like, yeah, you should do it. I'm not going to do it. You should do it for Bhakti Center, and it was like, okay, like I actually feel, and I've been telling my husband, like, maybe I'll open a different account. My account is pretty much for devotees. Like I post devotee stuff, but I'm like, yeah, I want to open a new account for wisdom, and just like, the question is just making time for that, right? Because we're always so busy doing so many services. So I haven't actually done it yet. But the inspiration is there of like, wow, what a wonderful way to serve Krishna. And this is something that I meditate on a lot, right? Because it's all about our intention, like it's just all about the why. Why are we
Yeah.
doing it? Why are we doing it? And checking ourselves, because I was just telling my husband this today, actually, because, before, like, when you work at the reception desk, like nobody gives you the time of day, right? Like, I mean, devotees are kind, but you know what I mean? There's not really prestige in that service, or management service that no one sees. It's really easy to just do service that nobody knows about.
Right. These aren't the glamorous like rock star services.
But then when you start teaching, and I've heard a class before where it's like you shouldn't teach unless someone asks you to, because you could start to get false ego from that or something. But I actually feel, because I also know it's my nature, and my Shiksha gurus all told me to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I was actually arguing with them. My husband knows this. I was not arguing, but I was going back and forth with them for months about I shouldn't step off management. I should just keep doing management. Bhakti Center needs me. I need to do this service. They need me. They don't want me to step off management. All my Shiksha gurus were like, Champakalata, you're a teacher. You should do this service, and you'll be happy. And it was such a surrender.
Yeah.
It was such a surrender, because I also told my husband, I don't want to have pride. I don't want to have pride of, oh, now I'm some teacher, like something like that, But it's like, but at the same point, then when you do the service, like as I've been teaching more, leading retreats, I become so inspired in my bhakti. I become so having dreams, and I become so enlivened and so happy and so Krishna conscious. So it's like, obviously I'm doing the right thing, And then it's like, I was telling my husband, I was telling him that I have all these doubts about doing this service, because what if the results start to come and people start to see me as some big teacher, and I'm scared, because I don't want to have pride. But at the same time, when you feel Krishna in your heart telling you have to do something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was telling him, like, but I feel like Krishna's telling me I need to do this.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I just need to completely detach myself to the results, and I just have to do the service.
Yeah. Well, so interesting also when you talk about like pride, right? Because we think about like pride as it relates to something very visible, like being a teacher, a speaker, a mentor, whatever, right? Like an author.
Which is an external
influencer.
Identity.
But then also it's so interesting, and again, not to call you out, but like, but
Call me out. It's okay.
No, and I think this is one of those things where you were sort of gracious and open enough to hear from your mentors and to hear what Krishna was trying to tell you in that moment. But it's so interesting to hear you reflect back where you were like initially resistant and saying, no, but the Bhakti Center needs me to manage.
Right, which
and
is
they
also
need me,
ego.
which is such a, right?
Yeah.
It's a different form of it, but it's that, again, it can become like that, like, and I've heard this from mentors and role models of mine where they're like, once you start, like, that's a bit of a red flag, right? Once you start telling yourself like, oh, but
I'm needed.
this particular service, this particular activity, like I'm needed. I'm the only one who can do that. It's like,
That's ego.
One of the stories in the Bhagavatam that I've always, for a variety of reasons, disliked until very recently was the story of Bharat Maharaj and the deer. I disliked it because it was often used as a way of like, to me, the way I often heard it was devotees could like, it was a way to sort of justify a certain kind of harshness. And they're like,
why did he go in Maya by being attracted to a deer? And
or like, like, be careful, Prabhu, like, remember what happened to Bharat Maharaj and that deer, like, don't get too affectionate toward, it's like,
right.
I have a bunch of friends who are like, grew up in devotee families whose like parents never let them get pets because of that story. So it's like, including a certain co-host and brother-in-law. So I was always like, that's like, I don't like that story. But more recently, I was able to kind of revisit the story and find so many like different dimensions to it. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing it up is one of the sort of dimensions that I've come to really appreciate is, there were certain key points in that story where Bharat Maharaj could have and needed to transition and needed to say like, I've done what I can for this deer. And now it's time for me to like let go and to entrust like, this is not in an emergency. I could take care of this deer. I could do the needful, but this is actually not what I set out to do.
Like the service will go on without you.
The service will go on without me. In fact, the service may go on without me better. Like I can,
right?
I'm sure there were other folks. So anyway, to me, that was like a bit of a, an eye opener, because it was like Bharat Maharaj stepping up and taking care of, a person, a living entity in a very vulnerable condition. That's not the problem, right? That's something glorious. That's his compassion. Prabhupada even writes in the purports about Bharat Maharaj's compassion as a Vaishnav. The problem was, one of the problems was when he sort of held on to it a little bit too long and lost sight of the fact that, like,
his spiritual goal.
This is not my goal, and this doesn't define me. And right. And so anyway, I'm just like reminded of that whenever there's this idea of like, oh, but this service can't go on without me.
Yeah.
So your point is that we should be like detached from the fruits of what we're doing?
Detached, or at least like self-aware enough, I think, to recognize like, oh yeah, like I had a role to play in this. And maybe now I'm like convincing myself that like this thing is dependent on me rather than like Krishna's in control. Again, going back to that doer, Krishna's in control.
Yes.
And it's time for the next step for me and the next step for the service. And, and that takes discernment and self-awareness, but I think it's necessary.
And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be responsible also.
Absolutely.
Because like I also went to Radhanath Swami and asked him about this.
Yeah.
And he said that, he actually said that we make advancement in Krishna consciousness according to how we take responsibility. And so whether you're sharing Krishna consciousness, you have to take responsibility in that service for caring for those people, or whether you're doing management, you have to be responsible. So he specifically told me, speak to Bhakti Center about what Bhakti Center needs. And if you are transitioning your role, you have to responsibly make sure it's covered, right? So we were responsible about it, but also that time of like, removing, because you're right, even that feeling of I'm needed, or it's a mix, also sincerity of wanting to serve, but feeling like I am needed versus like, actually, yes, the service can go on without me, and let me detach and take that next step in my life. And this kind of brings me to something I've actually been meditating on a lot recently. I actually messaged you about it because I was thinking of it so much, and it kind of goes back to this pride and humility thing, because I one time actually asked Radhanath Swami, it was right after Gauravani had done this awesome chant for change thing in DC.
Yeah, I remember that program.
Yeah, and I asked him, if we're able to do like nice service, how do we remain, like how do we not become proud about that? And he basically gave like the same answer that Lord Chaitanya gives to the leper after he cures the leper in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because he's like, now everybody's going to know me that I was cured by Lord Chaitanya. So how
I'm going to become famous.
I'm going to become famous, in my connection with Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya said, you always chant the holy name, and you take shelter of the holy name, and you always share with everyone about Krishna, and you won't become proud, right? That sounds like so simple. But Radhanath Swami, he was basically saying, you do the service, and you always take shelter of Krishna, you always chant his holy names, and basically like always remember who you are, that you're just the servant of the servant of the servant. And again, I'm preaching to myself. I'm just have not realized this, but I'm trying to realize this. And one thing I've been meditating on a lot recently, and I actually feel like this is also something that would be like a really good principle to share with the world, is the joy of insignificance.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that.
Yeah.
The joy of
I love that.
Yeah,
yes.
because in the world, right, basically the whole material world, especially if you look at New York City, it's running on the basis of people trying to become significant, right?
Yes.
And they think that their happiness is going to be when they become significant, whether that's being famous or whether that's being, marrying someone who loves them, or however it manifests, Like just that recognition being, and I mean that by being significant in the whole world's eyes or in one person's eyes,
Yeah.
right? But actually that chase for being significant, whether it's in material life or in devotional life, because we can also do it in devotional life. Even if it's like, look at me next to my guru. Let me post this on Instagram. Everybody can know how dear I am to my guru.
Yes.
You know? Then actually it just brings misery. Like it just brings misery. Just like the emotion of envy and jealousy is like, it burns the heart, right? Like you feel a burning sensation in your heart. It's this icky, heavy feeling, depressing, tamasic energy. But actually, you know, we hear so much about humility in our tradition. Trinadapi sunechena, right? We're supposed to be more humble than a blade of grass. We're supposed to be more tolerant than a tree. But actually, and it's Giri Govardhan Prabhu who's like always preached this to me so strong, that low self-esteem and low self-esteem and pride are two sides of the same coin, because it's all about yourself.
Right. You're still in the center.
You're still in the center. And then real self-confidence in Guru and Krishna are great, and I am insignificant. And humility are two sides of the same coin, because it's not being confident about ourselves, it's being confident in Krishna.
Yeah.
And recently, because I've like actually really been praying for humility a lot, like every day, just like begging Krishna to become humble. And it's such a joyful process, actually. Even if you're not humble, even if you're just begging to become humble, you know, and realizing that we're insignificant and that Krishna is so significant actually brings so much freedom, so much joy, because we're shackled when we're trying to be someone. When we just stop trying to be someone and just realize that Krishna is the someone we should focus on because he's the best, he's so awesome, and we just focus on Krishna and love Krishna, then we can just relax. Like
we can actually be present.
And
Also.
we can be present. It's freeing. It's liberating. We don't have to worry about how we're seen or how people perceive us. You know, like actually, my god sister one time had a dream, and I was sitting in the dream. In her dream, I was sitting at Radhanath Swami's feet, apparently telling him my problems. And
so it was a realistic
said,
dream.
Yeah, probably. So I was like, oh, really? Is that what I do? And he just actually told me in the dream to not care what other people think about me, you know, because it's such a shackling thing when you care, you know, and when you just stop, I am insignificant, and let me just read about Krishna and learn about Krishna and develop a relationship with Krishna. It's just the most joyful thing.
In this same connection, I saw a reel recently. It was in a secular way, but it was saying how the house that you've been working so hard to live in and to work for in 2 generations, a whole new family will be living there. There'll be no trace of you in like your grandchildren or your great grandchildren won't even know your name practically. They were like, it was like basically underscoring this thing about significance. Like you think you're so significant right now in your own life, but actually when it comes down to it, you won't be remembered.
That's such a terrifying thought.
It is a terrifying thought. Like
so
the comment section was really interesting because people were like, this is so depressing. But then there's people who are like, this is so freeing. This is so uplifting, not uplifting, but freeing more than anything. That you not to put so much pressure on yourself. Of course, it was in a secular way.
Right? To stop that rat race for significance.
Yes.
And just recognize like, it ain't gonna happen, like no matter what, right? Because like to the point of, I haven't seen the reel, but to the point of that reel, it's like I could try everything and anything and still.
Yeah. Like, do you know your great grandparents' name or what they did or anything like that?
I mean, yeah, barely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then.
And that's like blood family.
Yeah.
To speak of other people.
Yeah.
Krishna.
But then
you see someone's tombstone, it's like, who cares?
I feel like you don't like that.
No,
Please continue.
No, I like it, but I just think sometimes that terrifying realization then feeds into this, like whether consciously or subconsciously, but it's like, oh shit, if no one's gonna, like, if my great grandchildren aren't gonna know my name and my house is not gonna be mine and whatever, then at least let me like make it big on Instagram right now, right? Like, so then so I think that terrifying I'm calling it terrifying, but that sobering realization, I think could take you to a place of like awakening to like, wow, this whole thing is like rigged. Let me just like take a big step back from it and reevaluate. And I think for some of us, it can take us like deeper down into a rabbit hole of like, therefore I need to compensate. I'm also like right now processing because you happen to like hit a button that you didn't even know you hit.
Oh, sorry.
But no, it's okay.
Wait, what button?
The button of especially when I was younger, and this is like pre-Instagram. So, this is like the days of like actual photos, right? But it kind of became a little obsession of mine that like, I've got to be, right? Like, because I would love like ISKCON history and stuff, and I'd see these pictures, and there's Prabhupada on the morning walk, and there's TKG, and there's so-and-so and such on the morning walk, and in the, immortalized for all time. And there's a picture being taken of Radhanath Swami and the group, and like, I've got to be that dude that's like, if not right next to him, at least 3-4 people back. So I'm in the photo. So that it was almost like, now that I think about it,
so
I mean, some of it is just immature ego. Some of it is, insecure. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening, but I think part of it was like, on some level, it was like this, like I need a record that like I was part of this. Right. And that I mattered and like significance, right? That like I'm going to be part of this history or something. And I mean, I can distinctly remember when you talk about that icky feeling, like it was never, even when it happened, right? When I finagled and, whatever, like
you got in the picture,
snuck my way into being, because usually it was in some like, I wasn't there naturally. I was there because I was so, scheming and engineering it. So even when it happened, it was like this icky feeling because it was like, it just I felt so like awkward and self-conscious, and I was kind of like, he probably knows like what I'm doing, what's going on. And like, and I was never comfortable and never appreciative of like what was actually going on in the present moment. Right. And so those pictures have come and gone. I don't even know where most of them are now. Right. Especially because in those days, it's like, who even knows like where the physical, the hard copy of the picture is. So those pictures have come and gone, but like what I regret, and it's all part of the journey, so I don't, it's not like huge regrets, but what I regret was like, I wish I was just so much more present to like actually being there, because those days will never come back. And those were such magical, beautiful days that now seem like a dream, right? Now, like, anyway, it's just like to have that kind of sometimes those very like smaller, intimate settings or whatever. I just wish I was so much more present and appreciative and not stuck in this like, like stuck in my head and stuck in like this like desiring and striving and grasping and, I need to be significant and this person is more significant and, the comparison comes in and I feel like, not that I'm totally over it by any means, but once I sort of hit a point in my own kind of journey where I was like, this is exhausting. Like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I want a genuine relationship with this person, whatever it is, whether I'm in the picture or not. Like, it was just like this seismic shift. Wow. So anyway, you just brought a lot of that up. So thank you for that.
Powerful.
The significance thing is really interesting in relation to social media, because it's the antithesis of what social media is. Like, we're just trying to be significant. But I mean, you address that because you're saying it's for a certain end to connect people with Krishna consciousness and bhakti and things. But
to be so honest with yourself, like that, right?
It's hard for me personally.
I think it's hard it's hard in general, right? And so anyway, looping back to you didn't go the 100 days and you still survived. And right, the sky didn't fall and it wasn't the end of the world. And but what was that experience like? You
like not finishing
it and being okay with that?
Yeah, I just focused on my service at Bhakti Center, and I didn't really think about it so much. Like, It was just okay. I thought I actually, instead of focusing on what I didn't complete, I focused on celebrating the fact that I did complete 50 days. I think so often we focus on like what didn't happen or what was wrong or what we didn't do, instead of celebrating what we did do, what we did accomplish, you know?
Yeah.
So I just was happy that I did 50 days. And I think I was just inspired spiritually, you know? Yeah. I think we understand in the spiritual world that although the devotees are self-satisfied, they're also never satisfied because they always want more service. But I think that we also, so in a sense, the devotees always wanting to do more and wanting to do more service. But, and I know I get like, oh, next project, this, that. My husband makes fun of me that I'm doing more service for Bhakti Center now than when I lived in the building.
Wow.
He's like, yeah, he said that. And then Vasudev was joking and he was like, something like, he kind of compared it to like, yeah, if Arjuna left the battlefield, he would still fight, you know? He was like kind of making fun of me in
You
a
take the
sweet
girl
way.
out of the Bhakti Center, but you can't take the Bhakti Center out of the girl.
Yeah, like
that kind of thing.
something like that. But I think that, you know, I'm always thinking of like, now I want to do this, but I think sometimes to pause and be like, well, but I did do that, you know? So that's just what I focused on for that.
Yeah. All right, you're a newlywed. I gotta get this in. You're a newlywed.
I was just about to end. We're at time. Why don't you go ahead?
Just end on this? Like, so congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to both of
beautiful
you.
wedding.
Yes.
Beautiful wedding.
Oh, yeah,
Beautiful
you were
wedding.
both there.
Lots of blessings. I think the theme was blessings, and
It was
and
definitely
it
the
was
theme, yeah.
definitely present. But you are still very much glowing newlyweds, right? So two things. One, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about, you know, how you two,
How we met?
how you came into each other's lives. 'Cause I think it's
really, this actually might really encourage people, the story.
well, that's one of the reasons why. And then kind of as a follow up, and in the interest of time, I'll just club them into, you know, two questions into one. The sort of like, for those
Who are looking.
what sort
Yeah.
of advice, empathy, what would you like to put out there?
Yeah, I actually do have some realizations on this.
Please.
So I'll make it, because I think we're at time, I'll like make it brief. But I definitely had my phase where I was like brahmacharini for life.
I just I find that so fun. Like brahmachari for life.
I know, it's hilarious. Like people don't really know, like they know brahmacharis have that, but I don't think they
yeah.
know so much. I don't think many brahmacharinis have that. Like I think it's kind of more rare. But I actually, when I first went to India, I remember one Indian Mataji told me like, no, all women have to get married. And I remember I started crying. I was like, no, I want to be a nun. Like, I want to be a nun my whole life. Like, what do you mean I have to get married? No, I want to live in the temple my whole life. Like, I was literally sobbing my eyes out. And I had that mood until actually, it's quite personal, but I had a dream with Prabhupada and Radhanath Swami. And I had just met with... this is kind of embarrassing, but I had a boyfriend in kindergarten, if that's possible, like when you're like super young. I mean, basically you just play, like you play toys with each other. And I actually, like after I came back from India for the first time, I hadn't spoken to him since like middle school or something. And he like messaged me being like,
wait, is this the dream or this really happened?
This is real. And then I'll tell you the dream. He like messaged me like, do you want to get together and like have a tea? And for some reason I felt like, yeah, I should. So I went and not thinking I want to marry this person, but just thinking like maybe I can like, you know, share hearts about spiritual life with this person. Anyways, long story short, he was like vegan, had been in Delhi on a train when I was in Vrindavan and thought of me. He was like studying the Jesuits. He prayed for the world 3 times a day. He was basically like quoting things from the Journey Home. And he also like followed all the 4 regulated principles.
Wait,
like,
he had read the Journey Home?
No, he hadn't, but he was basically like quote,
naturally.
just like
He was like,
naturally.
yeah.
And I was just like, who is this person? I started thinking, well, I would really like to like share Krishna consciousness with this person. So in the dream, I was preaching to him. I'm sorry to use the word again. I was sharing Krishna consciousness with him.
No, you don't have to worry about use the word.
I was talking at him.
I was sharing Krishna consciousness with him.
I was shooting ISKCON bullets at him.
Let her finish the story, man. Come on.
And actually, Prabhupada was in the dream, Radhanath Swami was in the dream, and Radhanath Swami called me over and said, "Stop preaching to him."
That's my favorite part of the dream.
Yeah, he said, Krishna will send you someone just for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I woke up, and remember, I was in like total brahmacharini for life mode. I woke up and I was like, does this mean Guru Maharaj wants me to get married? So I called my Shiksha Guru Rukmini and I told her the dream, and I was like, does this mean Guru Maharaj wants me to get married? And she was like, yes. So I was like, oh my gosh. So it took me a little while to surrender to that one. But then like that was in 2015. So actually since 2015, and we now know it's 2024, I was like, not so actively looking at first, but then as the years went on, anybody who knows me knows I was very actively looking. And
wait, can I ask you a question? What was it about marriage that you didn't want to participate in?
Like I was not like averse to it. It was just like, I'm just so happy living in the temple. I just want to.
It was just that calling again.
It was
to the
just
ashram.
that calling to the ashram.
Got it.
It wasn't anything against it. It was just basically like, Krishna is my everything.
Right.
But as I like matured basically and realized that, and I guess this is my message that I have to share with like young women out there, is that marriage, I think I was also afraid because I had an experience in my life, because I was always very spiritual, religious in my whole life. And I had an experience in high school with a relationship like taking me away from that. So I think there was also like a fear, maybe subconsciously, that maybe a relationship would somehow maybe, change the depth of my bhaja and my sadhana. But my message to the woman out there is that it's the complete opposite if you find the right person. My message would be, don't settle for the wrong person. I think that sometimes we, as devotees, there can be a tendency, if you're a devotee, he's a devotee, then it's great. Like, it doesn't matter if you like each other. It doesn't matter if you love each other.
Or it's like you have that, like, you're into service X, he's into service X. You're like a disciple of such and such guru, he's a disciple of such and such guru. That
is so prevalent. And it's super dangerous, actually, because even if you like all of the same things, it doesn't mean you're right for each other. And also abuse is not okay. It's not okay, whether that can also be emotional. That can be telling someone they have to be someone a certain way. And I also think that sometimes there can be a lack of emotional maturity in relationships, especially like, and I'm not bashing brahmacharis. My husband was a brahmachari for 10 years, but unless you work on yourself while you're in the brahmachari ashram, like there could be a lack of emotional maturity. When graduating the brahmachari ashram, and maybe have suppressing some things or not dealing with some things that then can come out in a relationship and be quite dangerous. So ladies, don't tolerate that, and don't settle for I think like non-devotees, like, people who don't practice Krishna consciousness, like everybody, it's like, like there'll be someone else. If this person isn't right for me, there's someone else out there. But I think as devotees, especially female devotees, there's this consciousness of there's not so many men, and maybe I should just settle with this one out of a fear that Krishna isn't going to send the right one.
So it ends up being very fear-based, right?
Very fear-based.
Kind of poverty mentality, paucity mentality.
Yeah, and it can really bring you to the edge of having to trust Krishna and to just dive into the deep end. And I actually, right before meeting my husband, right, because I had to really face my fear and really say, like, I had this belief because I had seen beautiful examples of couples in my life. You and your wives. I saw, Virabhadra and Dhyana and Jai and Shama and Kunti and Madhavacharya. I saw so many amazing couples. And I was like, this is what I want. I want this kind of level of relationship in Krishna consciousness, where marriage takes you deeper in your Krishna consciousness, and you serve Krishna together. And I want someone who's serious, and that is who is my best friend, and who we just relate on every level. And so people kept saying, you're not going to find everything. There's no perfect relationship out there. You'll need to lower your standards. Everybody was telling me that. Yeah. And what about this one? What about that one? And I was like, I'm sorry, but it's just, I just believe that the right person is out there. I believe it.
Yeah.
And
that's not you being picky. That's you knowing what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I actually told devotees when they were pressuring me, because devotees do sometimes pressure. And I told Krishna, and I was actually in Jagannath Puri Dham a few weeks before I met my husband. And I told Krishna, I am happy serving you. And I will be just as enthusiastic serving you if you send me a wonderful man to be married to, or if you don't. And I will continue serving you with just as much enthusiasm.
Wow.
And I will be just as happy. I will be just as happy either way. And I will serve you either way. And now the results are up to you. And I also told Krishna that I would rather stay single than marry the wrong person. And then devotees were praying for me, and I just literally just put it at Krishna's feet and surrendered. And then it was literally a couple weeks later that my husband and I met, and the story is pretty cool. So, both my husband and I were totally anti-online, totally anti-devoteematch.com. I had this super ego misconception of only devotees who aren't well connected, who don't have friends, or who don't, it's horrible, but I'm just being honest.
I think the word you're looking for is loser.
Yeah, yes. Thank you.
I'm a loser devotee.
Anti-devotee
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Anti-devoteematch.com.
She said that. She anti-devotee
I was
match.
totally anti-online, and I was totally my false ego, and I was totally only losers use that, and there's no way I'm going on that. And I was I want a senior devotee or my guru to pick someone out for me, such false ego. And then it's ridiculous. And then a bunch of devotees were Champak, devotees I super respect. They were we got married from devoteematch.com, and they started naming devotees that got married from that.
Wow.
And I was really? You're such serious, nice devotees? They were you just go on it. And then Krishna arranged, the next day I got a cold. So I just felt pretty bad. I was I'm just going to lay in bed. Okay, I guess I'll sign up for devoteematch.com, whatever. And so
that's the mood you want to go into, or something like this.
Yeah. So I was okay, I'll just give it a shot. I don't really believe in it, but I'll just give it a shot. And I signed on. And the funny thing is I literally saw 50 devotees on it that I know, everybody's on that thing. And then unbeknownst to me, my husband registered the exact same day.
What?
And no, seriously. And he had just also changed ashram how many weeks before? 3 weeks before. And
he had this similar sort of
yeah, he also was totally
antipathy,
He had the same thoughts as me. He had the same thoughts. And it was his devotees there who were telling, because he also knew devotees that got married from that. And so I signed up a few hours before him. I scrolled for 5 hours straight. And he didn't pop up at first. And then I refreshed and he popped up. And after 5 hours of scrolling, I was oh, maybe that person. When I saw his profile, I was oh, Krishna, this is the person.
What was it about his
everything,
profile?
it was his about me, his services. I had always wanted to marry a brahmachari. A lot of girls are like that. And he was a brahmachari for 10 years, and his pictures, also pictures of him serving his spiritual master and the service he had done and the about him and just how serious he looked and just literally like everything about his profile. I literally wrote down, they don't give names, they give numbers. So I wrote down like 5.
Oh, is that a fact? They don't give names?
They don't give names. I wrote down like 5 stars.
You have to like connect.
And I was like, this is the person. And then, but it said he was in Finland. So I was like, oh, but like, this is the only person I want to message.
Wait, so you don't know his name? You know
No, I don't know his name.
You're like,
hold on a second.
Krishna, is 47961.7 the one? Please send me a sign.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Prabhu, what did you write in your about me that she was like going head over heels? Do you remember?
It's just basically like I've been devoted that many years, and I'm disciple of such and such. I did these services, pretty similar to her.
Right.
Like
And also like what you love.
Krishna Consciousness, temple commander, like management, and like I just love devotees.
These are not like super clever, like, this is not like,
there was
this
others.
is very like straightforward,
But I mean,
basic
if it's
thing.
similar, if they're doing similar things,
But
then
I forget the other stuff, but also in his about me and like his mood, he has a picture of his profile, but there was more also.
Of course,
But it was just like, this is the
Were
person.
there like devotee pickup lines on there? Like,
No.
So it's
But
very straight.
actually,
It's not like a cheesy, like,
I'm going to tell you something really hilarious though in a second. Like, it's worth it, okay? Like, even if we go like a few more minutes, this is really worth it. So I was like, I'm going to message him, but he's in Finland. Like, is he even going to be interested? So I go to message him, and he had messaged me 19 minutes earlier. And he had done this. I scrolled for 5 hours. He only scrolled for like 2 or 3. But he also decided that I was the only one he was interested in, and that he was only going to message me. And his message to me was, oh, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, all that. And then I know, like, I see, you serve at Bhakti Center. I really love Bhakti Center. Can you tell me about it? So I'm immediately like, is this guy interested in me or Bhakti Center? So I message him back, and I'm like, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, yada, yada. Thank you so much, Prabhu. But I have a question for you. Are you interested in learning more about Bhakti Center, or are you interested in exploring a marriage relationship with me?
love it. Straight American.
And so he messaged back, I'm interested in exploring marriage. So I was like,
Nice.
okay, phew. So then we started WhatsApping, and then the first day he sends me, and actually I had completely forgotten about this, but years earlier when I was in the Bahamas with Radhanath Swami, I had seen a couple wearing giriraj around their neck, and I was like, wow, I saw them worshiping him with so much love and devotion. I literally made a prayer. Someday I want to marry someone who worships giriraj, and I want to wear him around my neck and us to worship him together. And my husband worships giriraj, and actually when he came to America, he asked me, do you want to wear a giriraj around your neck? And I remembered my prayer, and I started sobbing my eyes out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Krishna
Mystical.
answers all your prayers.
Wow.
The whole thing is Krishna. It's completely mystical.
Wow.
It's the prayers of the devotees. It's the blessings of the devotees. Everything in spiritual life is the blessings of the devotees. And then we talked on Zoom for 5 hours straight the first day. Then the second day, 9 hours straight. He stayed up the whole night because of the time change, and then went to Mangal Arti. No eating, no eating, no sleeping. I know it's
awesome.
Yeah,
And
no, we literally we barely went to the bathroom. We didn't eat, sleep. It was ridiculous. And then the next day, 9.5 hours straight, no break, straight. We drank water, but straight. And then he was like, okay, I'm coming to New York. And then he came, and then it was basically
So spiritual, so romantic.
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And here you are.
And so you had to be humbled to the fact that devoteematch.com actually does.
Yeah. So it
Does have some
works.
Devotee
Shakti.
match.
Yeah, this is the plug for Devotee
This is a
Match.
plug. You
This
better send me
podcast
money.
has been sponsored by
Send-
devoteematch.com.
Send me money.
We just haven't gotten the money yet. So, but this is clearly a big commercial for devoteematch.
There are a few couples in Bhakti Center that I know that they met also.
This whole world is totally foreign to me, right? Because
It works.
my wife and I got together pre all of this.
Yeah.
So even the idea of like these websites or like apps, like even in the secular world, right? Like, because this is kind of a reflection of like how people date and couple in the secular world as well. But like, but you can bear testimony, right? It works.
Yeah.
We have to end.
Okay.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really
Thank
appreciate
you so much for having
Amazing
me.
conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I chant your name, Poems for the Supreme Beloved by Champakalata Sakhi Devi Dasi. I'll put the link in the description. Also her Instagram handle, Facebook, website, email, all that good stuff. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and also donate. You can donate in the description as well. Venkata, thank you for joining me as always.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gopal Krishna Prabhu, off camera.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
All right, everyone, have a good night. Hare Krishna.